Canvases from the dollar store are one of our favorite supplies to craft with. They're readily available, usually quite budget friendly, and come in a variety of sizes. Hi there, I'm Jane from Sustain My Craft Habit, and today we have something that we think you'll really enjoy. 5 Dollar Tree canvas hacks for beginners, using some of our favorite techniques like blending, decoupage, and paint pouring. Whenever I go to Dollar Tree, I stock up on these canvases because they're a great way to practice new techniques and skills, create some beautiful, usually seasonal decor that you can change up without feeling guilty about spending a lot of money, or to craft gifts. So I hope that you'll enjoy these, whether you're a beginner or a professional crafter. I think that there's something here for everybody to learn and enjoy. So let's get started. For our first beginner canvas project, we're going to do some blending and gold foiling, as well as cutting out a little phrase to make a beautiful piece of art. I've given this to my nieces for their birthdays, and I think it's just a fun way to add a special touch to a room. For the project, we'll need our canvas, acrylic paints, the printable that we have at sustainmycrafthabit.com, some Mod Podge, and optionally some diamond dust or glitter. We're going to start by simply blending the different colors together to create a beautiful backdrop. Now I wanted to start with the lightest colors that I had chosen and work my way down to darker shades. And I didn't have a light enough teal, so I just blended a bit of white into the teal that I had. I chose these beachy colors. I love the lake. You'll see even the next project has the same kind of beachy color palette with turquoise and greens and blues, but you could create this same project with purples, any colors, pinks, whatever a favorite color of yours is, and just get about 4 different shades from lighter to darker that go really nicely together. And as you can see, I just start by painting a stripe of the one color. I poured the paint directly onto the canvas so you don't have to worry about wasting paint, and then just simply use my paintbrush to blend it across. I'm using the same paintbrush for each of the colors. Don't worry about cleaning it up in between because it's that little bit of paint that you already have on the brush that helps with the blending. And as you're painting each block of color, make sure to wrap that color around the outer sides of your canvas frame. You'll want to make sure that your paint is completely dry before moving on to the next step. Now that you have this beautiful painted canvas, there's so many possibilities for the next step. I mean, you could leave it as it is. It's gorgeous. You could also do a Cricut decal on there, as we'll do in the next canvas project. You could do a rub-on image transfer, a sticker. We're going to make our own little decals here by cutting out a paper printout that we have these designs on the blog and using those as our little decals, putting them on with some Mod Podge. But before we do that, I wanted to add a little bit of extra to this project, and I had bought these gold foil sheets from Amazon that I haven't had a chance to use, so I thought this would be the perfect opportunity. I'm going simple and just using my glue stick. This is an Elmer's glue stick, and using that on a few spots to put some adhesive. And while it was still tacky, I just placed those sheets right over there. The trick here is to let it dry a little bit longer, and then we can remove some of the excess. But for now, I just worked slowly, and I wanted to kind of preserve some of it and not waste it all. So I was taking little sections and putting them all over my board. And this is what it looks like when all the different areas are covered. This was just done randomly, and obviously it is completely an optional part. You could instead paint gold on here. You could also put some glitter if you choose, or just leave it as it is. As that glue was setting, I just went back and continued cutting out my phrase. I used a utility knife to get into all those little grooves. And we have a couple different options that you can download over at sustainmycrafthabit.com. And you could put any motivational phrase, for a teen or a child for their room. I think it's a perfect gift idea. Okay, now I used just a soft bristled brush to brush the excess off of that gold. And look how beautiful it is. It has this beautiful reflective shine, obviously, that you can't get with paint alone. But I think if I was doing this more often, might get an actual adhesive for the gold foil. Although the glue stick worked pretty well. The nice thing about the gold foil is actually it's pretty inexpensive and a little bit goes a long way. So I think the whole package I got on Amazon for about $10 and I've used it on a number of projects. To stick my phrase onto the canvas, I first started by placing it roughly where I wanted it to go and then worked in little sections to brush on some Mod Podge underneath before pressing the cutout down. Again, if you're using a vinyl, you could just stick that or transfer that on there. Or even a label or sticker paper, then you could skip the Mod Podge step, but this is how I did this one, and it just takes a little bit of time. I tried not to put too much Mod Podge, mainly because you do see that little bit of shine on the canvas around the letters. So I tried to minimize that as much as possible. Even once it dries, it does dry clear, but the texture is a little bit different from the rest of the canvas. Now, once that Mod Podge is dry, you can actually go back in with a fine paintbrush over the letters, applying again another coat of Mod Podge, and then sprinkling some glitter or diamond dust to add a little bit extra sparkle to your new piece of art. So that's our first beginner canvas project. My favorite part is that you can easily replicate the process on a larger canvas for an even more impactful result. For our second canvas project, we're going to do paint pouring. It creates beautiful pieces of unique art, one of a kind, that you can then dress up and customize any way you'd like. I'm going to make a Cricut decal to put on our paint poured canvas and just to create a cute piece of art for the craft room. There are a number of techniques to do this paint pouring method, including creating your own with a paint pouring medium and acrylic paints. But for beginners, I love to use this pre-mixed solution. It's called Fluid Art Ready to Pour Paint by Decor, and it has a lovely light consistency that you can use for your paint pouring project. So all I did was poured this paint into a cup, alternating all the different colors to create a bit of a mixture, but I didn't stir that up because you want the colors to kind of stay separated. And I just did this until I was pretty confident I'd have enough to cover my canvas. So I think there were 5 colors, the 3 liquid fluid paints, as well as some white and a bit of gold acrylic paint. It wasn't a fluid pouring paint, but I just used what I had in my craft collection. And then I poured those onto 5 different areas of my canvas and just simply moved them around as best as I could. This does get really messy, so if it bothers you to have paint on your hands, you might want to consider wearing some gloves. You just kind of keep going, adding a bit more paint as needed, and then wiggling that canvas around. It's really fun. It's just every canvas is going to be completely different, unique, and one of a kind. You can play with all the different colors, but it's pretty simple. Takes a little bit of time, but just until you get everything covered on the canvas. I did use a paintbrush to help cover the sides of the canvas just so that the paint would wrap all the way around. But again, there's not much else to it. And after this, you're just going to let it sit a bit and dry overnight, ideally 24 hours until all the paint completely sets. If you don't want to waste your paint, I like to have a smaller or another canvas underneath. You can also use the drippings and droppings of the paint once they're dried for your bullet journaling or your junk journal or embellishments onto cards. So there's lots of ways to repurpose all the paint so that you're not wasting any of it. To help my canvas dry, I had propped it up onto some popsicle or craft sticks just so that it wouldn't stick to my surface, and then let it dry actually a couple of nights. And this is what it looks like when it's all ready to go. It's so beautiful and smooth, and that gold, I love just that little bit of sparkle on there. Look at all that texture, and it reminds me of an ocean or water flowing. It's absolutely beautiful. Once your paint poured canvas is all done, there's so many things you can do with it. You could hang it up as is because it's beautiful. I decided to add a vinyl decal on there that I cut out using my Cricut Maker 3 and a design from Design Space. After cutting it out, I used my weeding tools to weed out the excess vinyl and then transferred that with some transfer tape right onto the front of the canvas. There are so many fun designs in Design Space to use. I picked this one that says craft more, worry less, so that I could have this little sign in my craft room, but you can make it for any theme. And after removing that transfer tape, we have this beautiful canvas that's personalized and would be lovely as a gift or just decor for your home. For the small canvas, I simply added one of our upcycled tags that we made in a video a few weeks ago, and I'll link below. Only a small proportion of people who come across our videos subscribe, so if you enjoy this content, consider pressing that like button and the subscribe button so we can stay in touch. If you've never seen the Mod Podge image transfer technique, I think you'll really like this next canvas project. I printed this design on my printer at home. It typically works better with a LaserJet printer. I think it turned out really beautifully. For this technique, you'll need the graphic printed out. I got this one from Creative Fabrica and I'll link it below. I printed it on my LaserJet printer, but I'll also show you how it works with the inkjet print as well. You'll need Mod Podge and your canvas, and then we'll also need a small cloth and water for the latter step of removing the paper. To begin, we're going to apply a generous coat of Mod Podge over the entire surface of the print. This is really important. I know when we do decoupage, less is more, but in this case, you really want it gooped on there. And the idea here is you're almost creating this coating that's going to suck up that laser ink right into it over time. So really spread that over, and you'll see on my project that I didn't put quite enough down on the bottom part on the brown section. So later when we were peeling it off, it didn't look as perfect. So I can't stress this enough. You want to go all the way over your whole print and cover it with that Mod Podge and work pretty quickly because we want to place it down while it's still wet. Okay, now we're simply going to take that print while the Mod Podge is still wet and place it face down onto the canvas. You want to position it so that it's nice and centered, and I didn't cut it out at all. I just did the whole page and put that down there just like this. Press it on nice and firm. And the trick with the canvas is because it's not a rigid surface, it's a little bit hard to get that contact, so you can flip it over and kind of press it down from the back side. You might even want to place a book or something inside here to push it down while it's drying. And just make sure again that you have enough of that Mod Podge going all the way to the ends. Here I seem to not have quite enough, so I just took my brush and tucked a little bit more in there. Now the trick here is to let your Mod Podge dry completely. I was doing this on a live video, so I was in a bit of a rush and used my heat tool to dry it. But ideally you want to let this just sit and marinate overnight so that it'll dry, and again that ink and the Mod Podge have a chance to interact together. So if I was drying it overnight, I would flip this over, I would place a book on there and just let it do its thing. Okay, it's the next day or a little bit later, and I'm confident that my Mod Podge has dried. Now it's time for the fun part of removing the paper backing. You can use some scissors to just trim the excess paper. It's optional. And then we're going to spray this paper with water. I have a little spray bottle that's perfect for this, but the goal is to get this paper nice and soaked. I sprayed it and then spread that water around. And basically, as we wet that paper from the back side, we can now start to rub away the extra paper. And you can see then that it sort of reveals our print on the underneath. And hopefully now this print has sort of soaked into the Mod Podge, which has dried. And we're just taking off that top layer. You're going to probably need to do this several times. It takes a little bit of time to do it, but it is really fun and satisfying. I like to do it once, the first coat, almost dry it just to see then where I need to do a little bit more. But look how beautiful it is with that print kind of starting to peek through, and all these little shreds of paper you're just going to throw away. So you're just going to keep working the paper. I'm using my fingers, but you can use a little cloth Later, I took a little microfiber cloth, which the texture also helps to rub off that paper from the top. So while we're doing this on this canvas, there are obviously so many ways to use this technique. You could print family photos and put them on a wood slice to create a rustic gift. You could apply this onto, like I said, I've done a silver tray that was first painted with a coat of white paint and then applied a seasonal design on there to create a lovely piece of decor. So there's lots of different options for this method. As I was working on this lower section, I think I rubbed it a little bit too hard, or I hadn't put enough Mod Podge on there, or I didn't let it dry long enough. In any case, it kind of took off some of that wood part of the design or of the print. So later I took an acrylic paint pen and just filled that in. In case you're curious, I'm going to show you how this turned out with my inkjet printed paper. And it all looked really great at the outset, but the more I rubbed with the water on the back side, it lifted up the ink from the paper much more than the LaserJet version did. So here it's still looking pretty great, but then after I dried it, I went to repeat the process with another coat of water, and it seemed to really lift off the blues and the teals from the print. So in the end, it still looked beautiful. It went kind of pinkish on me, but I still think it has this lovely different vintage vibe to it. So if you do have an inkjet printer at home, I encourage you to try this technique. It is really cool, and you'll learn how the colors will change on your design. Because with the inkjet version, the colors sort of spread out, it almost stained the canvas around the outside with this little bit of gray. So you could either, I would say, cover the whole surface with Mod Podge first. I think that's a great way to sort of protect the canvas from the ink. Or you can do as I did later and just take some white paint and touch up around the outside to really give it a brighter finish. A final step that's really helpful, especially with the inkjet version, is to apply a coat of sealer. You can either use the Mod Podge, or I like to use this DuraClear varnish because it has a nice liquidy kind of texture to it. And then this really just helps to give it that look that it had when it was wet. I don't know how to describe it, but it kind of locks in the colors and makes the contrast a little bit higher. So I really like to do this step as a finishing touch to these image transfer projects. Okay, so here are the finished projects. This is the inkjet version, and here is the LaserJet version. So which one do you prefer? Our fourth canvas hack idea is the busted canvas. These busted out onto the crafting scene about a year ago and are just so fun. I've made some for Christmas, fall, winter, and I even did one, I think, for Valentine's Day. So today I'm going to show you how to make one for spring using an adorable graphic that I've linked below. The trick to creating a beautiful busted canvas project is in the choice of the patterns that you're going to use. You're going to need one design for the back side of the canvas, like I'm using here, and then a contrasting color or design for the front of the canvas. Starting with the back of the canvas, I decided to decoupage on this green leafy paper napkin, and so I started by brushing a coat of Mod Podge, drying that, and then we're ironing in the single ply of the napkin onto the backside. Now, if you don't like to decoupage, you don't have to for this project. You could instead simply paint the backside of the canvas in a color of your choice, maybe do a crackle finish, do a paint pouring. There's so many different options. I love to decoupage, and we have tons of paper napkins in our shop to choose from. You could also use printouts or scrapbook paper. So it's just very versatile and so many options. After doing the back side, I repeated this process to decoupage on actually a paper napkin that I found at Michael's onto the front side. So first I applied a coat of Mod Podge to the front surface, including those side pieces, and then dried that completely. My daughter happened to be crafting alongside me while I was making this project, and she was upcycling a little wooden box for Easter. Now, to help with decoupaging to the front side of the canvas, I was applying the heat from the back just because the canvas itself from the front side is was like bowing inwards, but this worked really well to get it to stick. So you can see here that the front side is decoupaged on there. And yeah, I found this paper placemat at Michael's before Easter. The only problem is that it's quite thick, which you would want for a placemat, but it did make it a little bit more challenging to decoupage onto the surface. I just had to apply a little bit of extra Mod Podge, and then especially to get around the sides, make sure to trim off the corners and wrap it around, applying more Mod Podge as I went, working little sections at a time. But in the end, it turned out really, really well. I was able to wrap those edges all the way around my canvas, which made it look really nice and finished and professional, and hid all these little staples here as well. Okay, now it's time for the fun part of cutting through the canvas. I flipped it over and cut from the back side. Just make sure you have something underneath so you don't cut through your tabletop. I did about 6 cuts to create a dozen panels. You'll then want to glue your graphic face forward onto the back side of the frame so that you can see it peeking through from the front side. My camera stopped recording at this point, so I'm going to show you that step with this autumn busted canvas craft, but it's really simple. Just apply the hot glue around the back of the frame and then place your print on there and trim off the excess paper. Next, you're going to flip your canvas to the front side and now glue back each of these little flaps to create that exploding busted canvas look. You could add other embellishments to the front of your canvas, such as a bow, florals. I left mine simple, but I did put a little set of string lights on the inside just so that it would glow and light up. And that's how this looks in the night. It's so, so pretty. So our final Dollar Tree canvas hack today is a reverse canvas project. Now this is such a cool technique. It involves taking the canvas off of the frame, flipping it around, and then actually using that frame as part of the completed craft. I've made a bunch of these in the past, like this lavender one, as well as some others. And today I'm going to show you how to make an adorable welcome sign for your front hallway, or I have mine on the porch in the summer. Is just a cute way to greet guests when they come to the door. So the first step of the reverse canvas technique is to cut the canvas off of the frame. Make sure you have a sharp utility knife to do this, and you'll just go around working around the staples. If you wanted to, you could try to pluck the staples out and get to it that way, but I find that that takes quite a bit of time and is much harder than this technique. We're not going to use the backside of the frame, so it's okay if those staples and that bit of canvas stays on there, but if that bothers you, you can definitely take the time to do that. Sometimes I find some scissors also help to get right into there to cut all those little strings of the canvas off. So we are going to use the canvas still, and you could do anything on the front side. I, of course, am going to decoupage, but you could paint it. You could do that paint pouring technique we did earlier. You could stamp it or even leave it white. There's sky's the limit here, but I am applying a coat of Mod Podge all over the surface. We're going to use the iron-on method to decoupage this striped napkin onto there. I was humming and hawing between the polka dot and the stripes, but in the end opted for the stripes. So I removed the excess plies of the napkin and then cut out these panels of this. We've recently listed a lot of the napkins that I use in my videos in our SMCH shop, and I'll link that below. So these napkins are available on there, as well as dozens of other ones. So after that decoupage glue was dried, I simply positioned my cutout napkins right over there and lined them up. And this is the nice part of the iron-on method, that the decoupage glue, Mod Podge for example, is dry, so you can reposition your paper as needed and not worry about ripping it. Once I was happy with the placement, I simply placed a piece of parchment paper over top and then used my mini press to press that right onto there. You can use any little iron or even an iron that you use for ironing your clothing. Really, the idea here is a heat source that'll fuse that napkin into the Mod Podge. The next step is to dress up our frame. So this is what the frame looked like when I removed the canvas from the top of it. It has a really nice shape to it, but I wanted to stain it a darker brown. I like to use this faux stain technique of mixing up half water and half brown acrylic paint. And then it creates this light consistency that works really well as a stain. And I put that all over my frame. You could obviously paint the frame any color you'd want with an acrylic paint. You could do a crackle technique. You could even decoupage it. So again, anything that you'd like. You could leave it plain and unfinished if you'd like as well. But I usually find these frames are not the nicest quality. They might have knots in them and blemishes. So covering it up with some sort of treatment is always a great idea. I like to just use a paper towel or the leftover plies of that napkin to wipe off the excess stain. Then you're going to dry that completely, and once it dries, it does lighten a bit, so you can always add on a second coat. But isn't this lovely? Now you have this wood frame on this decoupaged canvas. Now I had picked up this little welcome wood cutout, I believe from Dollar Tree, and decided to paint it just with a coat of white paint and then all the little embellishments with browns, silvers, and the little flowers. I think this is just so cute for springtime. It could be in your garden or backyard, but I have mine out on my front porch. Now it's time to put all the pieces together to create our little sign. So I just like to use some hot glue to glue my canvas onto the back side of the frame. The easiest way is to flip everything face down and then work in little sections. You want to make sure your canvas is stretched as taut as you can and evenly so that it's not wrinkled looking from the front side. Next, we're simply going to flip that over and trim off the excess canvas with a pair of sharp scissors. And you want to try to get as close to the edge there as possible. But look how pretty this reverse canvas is. We're going to finish it off by gluing in our little welcome sign. At this point, I felt that the white of the welcome wasn't really standing out as much as I wanted to, so I just used a little bit of my silver paint and created almost like a galvanized or a distressed edge with my paintbrush. And there's our sweet new reverse canvas welcome sign. I hope you've enjoyed these Dollar Tree canvas hack ideas. Do let me know in the comments below which is your favorite. I hope we've shown you that the canvases are really versatile, budget friendly, and a great way to try something new. There's all sorts of different ways that you can use them beyond just painting on them, and we hope we've convinced you of that today. If you'd like to see more of these types of canvas projects, let us know in the comments below, and if there's a particular one you'd like to see demonstrated, just let us know. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you again next week. Bye.